It's a real pleasure to have Tom here tonight, and I'll just tell you a little bit about him. Born and raised in Baltimore, Rabbi Hain studied music at the Peabody Institute of Johns Hopkins University. He earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin, and then a master's degree and rabbinic ordination from the Hebrew Union College. Rabbi Tom, as he is known, was a ubiquitous presence throughout the greater Cincinnati area from 1995 through earlier this year. In addition to creating and overseeing the Jewish Spirituality Network of Southwestern Ohio, Rabbi Hain served as rabbi, music director, educator, and chaplain for numerous institutions, including Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center and Congregation Ohav Shalom. He was awarded by the Jewish Federation of Cincinnati for outstanding community service and is widely known and regarded as a thoughtful teacher, life cycle officiant, musician, and spiritual activist. This past July, Rabbi Hain moved to Vermont with his wife Alexandra to serve as rabbi of Congregation Shir HaHarim, the Brattleboro area Jewish community. He also serves as interfaith chaplain for Beacon Hospice. In addition to his studies of Kabbalah and Jewish approaches to spirituality, Rabbi Hain also spent a decade studying and practicing Eastern approaches to spirituality in the San Francisco Bay Area. So would you please welcome Rabbi Tom.
Thank you, Danny.
Sure. Thank you.
Great opportunity to talk about the calling. Are there any other clergy or chaplains here? I know there's one right here. Anyone else? Philip's here? Okay, good. Peggy. But I would guess all of us have felt, a calling one way or another. So I'll be interested, I could say a few things, and then I'll be interested to hear your reactions to the film. I'm going to say that the calling that the four individuals in this film were responding to was a calling to give expression to something transcendent that they sensed in their lives. Something that is people often struggle to articulate and probably finds its expression usually in one form of religion or another. So I'll be interested to hear how you felt these individuals were similar in many ways and how you felt they were different. Danny mentioned that I studied Eastern spirituality for some time, and I eventually came to the realization that I wasn't born a Buddhist or a Hindu, but I was born a Jew, and that I would be best integrated as a person, as a human being, and as a spiritual being if I were to find spirituality in my own tradition. Had I been born a Christian, I probably would have followed that calling. So I find that in my own case and in the cases of these individuals that we struggle finding a way to create a bridge between tradition and the transcendent that these traditions try to give expression to. Create a bridge between the tradition and between a predominantly secular society where people may not be either so aware of the transcendent or be able to give expression to it, or maybe they're okay with just living it also. I found it interesting, something that Steve, the priest, or the Catholic student, said. He, after a difficult situation where a child had died, he said, let me see, because I wrote it down. Some people say God is a mystery. That doesn't comfort me. And I find it interesting that some people are okay with ambiguity, but others struggle with that and find comfort in the language and the metaphors that these traditions have to offer. He clearly does, and many of the people he ministers to, especially within the Catholic Church, do. You could say the same for those that come from any tradition. Tahara, the Muslim student, you could see her struggle. The way it brought her to tears at one point. You remember feeling she was very frustrated with the teacher who had a very male, you could say chauvinistic attitude about heaven. She struggled with that and is trying to be that bridge between tradition and modernity. You could see it with Shmuley, the rabbinical student who was trying to integrate the halakhic standards of kashrut, keeping kosher, with the ethical standards that it implied to him inherently. And you could see the challenge with Rob, the Protestant preacher, trying to make the word and what his teacher described as it's been put in a white box. It's become irrelevant for a lot of young people in Hispanic and African American communities. So he is recasting that transcendent message in a way that is real for them. So to summarize my own statement, I guess people who feel a calling from something that they understand to be transcendent. And they find ways to give expression to that, usually in the traditions into which they're born, but not always. That's not always the case. So it's a constant challenge, and it's something that enriches the lives not only of the communities they serve, but clearly the individuals that feel that calling. So I'd like to open it up to your reactions and your questions. Maybe I'll begin with a question just to get us started. I think part of the intention of this documentary was to show that these students, rabbis, priests, chaplains, are in many ways just ordinary people. But how would you say that they're different? What is something that makes these individuals different from others who may not describe themselves as responding to a calling, to a call?
It would seem they all had an internal spark that was powering a search for the direct experience, and maybe some of the problems they were having that were shown there were with the older traditions that looked more at structure and law. But the spark is something very obvious, and you mentioned a Catholic priest. Reminds me of something Carl Jung said, it's not what you know that heals, it's who you are. So if you have that spark, and you can transmit that spark heart to heart, people get it in the sense healing. If it's just words like, God's a mystery, we don't know, it goes right over that.
That's right. Well said. It's got to be real for them.
When the priest said that, I don't think he was saying that he himself was not comforted. I think he was saying that he was not comforted with it, or did not accept the path, the standard consolation, that it didn't bring his felt sense to serve, to act as a catalyst, to act as a bridge between their emotional event and a greater faith-based.
Exactly.
And all of them said to serve. All of them want to function in their own way as a catalyst.
That's right.
And to bridge emotion and to bring it into a larger picture.
Yeah, thank you. Judith?
I find myself thinking that everybody has the call, and it's just the lucky ones who are able to hear it. You know, whether we hear it because we suffered and found God that way, or whether we experienced great love and found God that way. But it just seems, I think everybody's being called, and it just, we're deaf until a certain point, and then we start hearing.
People agree with that statement? Well, or you might have other comments. Yeah, I invite you to respond to that or to something else.
I think religion has monopolized the concept of being called. And they've ritualized it around clergy so they get zapped on their head and they're called, and we know they're really called. But I really think we're all called. You know, our life calls us, our privilege calls us, our hurt calls us. It's like to be authentic, to be real. And just a certain group of people have kind of monopolized that whole concept. But I agree. I think we're all called if we listen to our life and we listen to what's around us. Pain calls us.
For those of us who are Christian, Martin Luther had something to say on that. He called it the priesthood of all believers. Everyone who has been baptized is actually called, and that's obviously not exclusive to humanity, but to Christians. Everyone who has been baptized is called to a greater service.
I don't know where this comes from, but I heard it said in early Buddhism that there was this problem where all the men wanted to become monks because that's what the Buddha was teaching. So hey, let's all go. And so they had to figure out how do you separate that? How do you convince these men that it's okay to stay with their families and do what most people should do? And where's that line? I think that's a question in my mind after watching that. How do people know if they're truly called that way, and is it somehow more valuable, or are we, our own callings, are those just as important?
Beautiful. Thank you. I see some hands over here. First in the back, and then we'll come forward.
Well, I'm somebody, I feel like I was never called. And I know you're talking about called. The question is called to what? Because I grew up in a Catholic family. My father's brother was a priest, and he married Mom and Dad. And I got this feeling that I was always supposed to be a priest or something, but I didn't want to be. So I feel like uncalled. At no time did I think I'd want to be like, and then when I saw the people on the screen, I wouldn't like to be like any of them. So I have heroes in my life, but none of them were heroes for me. So.
But you lead worship every Sunday beautifully. On your
This is my
guitar.
point.
I had to tell him you can.
Thank you. Please.
I just felt they were really young, and that they were filled with selfhood, and they were called to be leaders, and it wouldn't matter. It just so happened that they'd all gotten programmed in a certain religious track. Wouldn't have mattered if they were programmed into business. They would have been, Bill Gates or something. That. And I guess having been called at one point, I spent 9 years following the call to be a Catholic priest, and I found that I was also called away from it. Because if Jesus had been a priest, he would have been a rabbi, and he didn't do it. So it was like, at a certain point, it became, you're being called out of the church, basically. If you really want to be a priest, get out of the church. So seeing these folks, I just felt their youth more than anything, I think.
I see. Interesting word you used, programmed. And I think I agree with you on that. I mean, there's a certain amount of cultural, religious programming that has given shape to who they are and how they interpret that calling, whether as a religious one. Thank you. Here and then Danny, I know you.
I was a little disappointed because it's called The Calling, and I was really hoping to hear people sorting out what it meant to be called, talking with their peers, feeling what differentiated them. I think the film did a really good job of showing 4 people in 4 different religions taking on the roles of the leaders or the priests or the rabbis or whatever within their religion. They were younger, they were taking on responsibility, they were learning from other people, they were adding their own twist. I thought that the little scene at the end of the priest, the dying priest, and the young priest and the dying priest was actually, a very beautiful part of it, but I thought that was sort of the tradition they were showing, whereas I was actually really interested in those folks talking to their friends and deciding how they got called, what was different from their peers.
So
and that's what the title sort of meant to me. The calling, the calling sort of, the image I had from that was the person being called and how they sorted that out, rather than how they grew into their traditions.
Right. So you think that what we saw took place after the calling, and you were kind of interested in what led them to this point in their lives. It's a good point. Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but just to quickly respond to that, I would just point out that we watched a 60-minute version of a 90-minute version of a 4-hour documentary. And so it may well be.
Yeah.
Because what I had read and heard about it beforehand also suggested that the focus would be more on this question of what calls certain young people to these, to these paths. I wanted to make a different comment, sort of more in connection with the discussion as it was unfolding, which is that I'm just speaking personally here, I feel a little bit of a sense of frustration around what seem like wonderful people, wonderful young, motivated, smart people with a desire to make the world a better place and seem like people who really have an interest and capacity in questioning the world around them and questioning what they're told, and all of which I think is good. And the reality that where they have found the opportunity to put all those positive attributes to use is within what I consider the constraints and problematic confines of organized religion. I had a vaguely analogous experience very recently. I was talking to someone about the main gallery of the museum and that space, and it's a kind of special, big, vaulted ceiling kind of space. There aren't that many other spaces like it here in town. We're planning some renovations that are going to bring out those features and make it even more special. And we couldn't find any language to talk about that experience of the space and the specialness of the space that doesn't reference religion. Like it's a sacred space, or you have a holy feeling, or a meditative. Meditative maybe gets away from organized religion a little bit, but it's hard. It's hard to talk about certain wonderful things in life. And then, so this resonated for me here a little bit, that people who have these real positive motivations, I wish people felt like there were more outlets, and I wish there were more ways for people with those skills and those motivations to put them to use for the greater good of the world outside of organized religion, because I think there are problems with organized religion.
You bring up some good points there. I guess I'll respond and take if anyone else wants to comment on that.
And you can also please just ignore me.
Oh, okay. Well, let me say something, and then Sharon, and then you'd like to say something too. One thing is that it seemed that they struggled, probably. You could see it probably most clearly, well, the rabbi and the Muslim student too, their frustration with tradition. And I think they felt an obligation somehow to honor the tradition and to try to change it from within. So that's what I saw happening there. And I think that's true of my own experience too. And I as a Buddhist practitioner, I felt, why? When I learned that the same teachings could be found in the Kabbalah, I said, why didn't I know that growing up in temple? It was never, I didn't see anything that hinted of spirituality in my early life in Judaism. And so I felt an obligation to try to bring that to light. And so to try to bring change from within. That's one idea. The other is that the transcendent, or what elicits in us a sense of awe and wonder, is so magnificent, and it's so different for everyone. And I guess if you become analytical to try to describe, well, what is that? The words are very hard to find. And I think we find that religious language and metaphor is one way of giving expression to it, but then people mistake that for what it is intended to describe. Using the Zen metaphor, it's like looking at the finger that's pointing at the moon. You get stuck on looking at the image and not the reality of it. So, people who find that in other avenues of expression like art and music and other ways of just living it. But when you actually start thinking or talking about it, the language for it is just not there, and I think it's mostly found in religion and spirituality, the kind of metaphors. Anyway, that's my take on it. Sharon, and then this gentleman.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Danny. The vocabulary that we have to go with the vaulted spaces and architectural, historical, there's no getting around that. And so we do need to develop a new vocabulary for that kind of a space. But what interested me about each of the people in this was that they each had their own individual mission or vision, and they were incorporating it into the religious context. So there was still a struggle within them because of who they were, to fit into it and to create something new and to honor it.
Yeah, well said.
I think for what it was well done for young people to get the call and have the family and the guts to go with it. What I thought would have been good is if they had some people at midlife who decided that the business world and success and money and the ladder against the wrong wall of success didn't work, because I think they're more grounded in many ways and have much more to offer. And that would have been nice if it was part of it too.
Yeah. It's possible that we missed that. I think somewhere it said there were 7 people in this whole...
Yeah, it's 7 million, that's
Were there some
we only saw
older?
4.
Oh.
Not sure.
I don't know.
Okay.
And I will say, Peggy, before calling you, is you were suggesting that you might have liked to have seen what led them to this place. I worked with Danny to try to figure out which parts we would edit out, and there was one section that we edited that might have been interesting to you. Rob, the Protestant pastor, or the preacher, he went back to Samoa for his father's funeral, and his father was some kind of a chief and very highly respected religious hero, religious figure in his community, who Rob described as Elvis. And they showed a picture of him. He wore sunglasses, and he had a fancy hair, and he just probably, the bling, and he probably really loved being, a leader in his community. And you could see that probably influenced Rob in his decision to become a religious leader. Okay, thank you.
Oh, I just wanted to dovetail off of what this gentleman said about older. I happened to go to seminary when I was 40.
Great.
And those of us who are older and second career people, we always kind of admired the kids who were right out of college. And they always said, because they had their whole ministry ahead of them, their whole lives. And they were young and vibrant. And they said to you, oh no, you've got the life experience. I wish we could have been you, And we wish we could have been them. So, it's a big struggle.
Thank you.
Think of the space matrix.
For 12 years, I was on the commission, and I listened to people who wanted to be priests and talked about their calling. And one thing I noticed is that every time they talked about it, it had this great authority that God called me. And I want to say, there's more to it than that. And sometimes the religious folk have authority, calling gives them authority. Where if I'm called to be a doctor or I'm called to be an accountant, I don't have that same authority base that a metaphor system gives you. And like all power, I think in metaphors and ritual, Danny referred to, power can be used for good and for ill. And we can have this debate on how organized religion has been for good and for ill. But there is a power there. And so the authority issue around calling is an interesting one to combine.
Are you saying that in your experience on that commission that's what you were gleaning as motivation for a lot of people?
Well, that's the only language they allowed themselves to give it. I wanted them to say, I really love people. I'm really good at this. I really have a hunger for the poor. And that's just very human and very me. But if they felt I think they felt the official answer was God called me, and that's what I had to give. And I said, that didn't cut it with me. I needed much more than that. And sure, God called you, but what else?
My mentor pastor, just to really be quick, my mentor pastor had the best metaphor. She said the calling was like a piece of gum stuck on your shoe. It just wouldn't let go.
But a pediatrician could have that too.
Absolutely.
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 Yeah. You know, the Muslim student said something about feeling served, calling to serve humanity. And it's just the way she chose to do it. Yes, love you from.
I was glad to see their confusion. I was glad to, and only young people will do this. They'll try to look inside themselves and determine, where am I at here? What's going on? What do I really want? What do I really believe? Well, God may have called them, but who is God? You know, it's that kind of thing, and I was glad to see that. I appreciate young people a lot.
So you felt you saw that questioning going on?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just the sudden tears, you know, and the statement by the young priest or the whatever they're called, God is a mystery. Well, you know, the young Muslim girl who was sitting there crying, you know, is crying for a reason, and but she doesn't know what that reason is. It's something in her soul. I'm not into organized religion either. I'm a congenital Catholic, but I should have been a Buddhist. I don't know. That's just some of the things that I saw.
I think your point's very well taken, but take it from me, there's people at midlife who ask those same questions and have those same tears and those.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Did anyone notice there was a scene that really caught me when after the rabbinical students had their meeting and they gave each other a high five, one of the students went over to the piano and started playing some melody in a minor key, and there was a drone. And that wasn't coming from the room, because after he finished, it was in the same key as the Muslim woman who was doing that kind of Arabic singing. And so I don't know if the editors added that in or not, but it really created a continuum and really connected one mode of expression with another. I found that there was something very universal about their calling that seemed to transcend their respective religious traditions. Did anyone notice their energy?
We have to talk about that?
That's the
I don't know how you all felt. I found them all to be very sympathetic characters, very charismatic, and you know, in my own personal experience, I don't always feel that way about religious leaders who I've encountered. But the only characteristic that was revealed here in the portion of the film that we saw about any of the four of them that gave me the creeps a little bit it had to do with Shmuley, and I wondered a little bit, what's this? It almost like it was like, what's his attraction to the horror scene, or like, why is he racing off to the fires there, or you know, was there something a little off kilter there, or something a little too much about needing to be Superman that crossed over into problematic? But then he seemed to be asking himself the same question too, and so that kind of that redeemed him.
I wondered about that myself, and the conclusion I came to was that he felt it was a sort of mission for him to be seen. Oh, there's the rabbi with the tzitzit hanging out and the yarmulke, and that must mean, and he's here. That must mean the Jewish people really care about us, or they're really engaged, or something. And he felt that just his presence, his religious presence, was important.
But that was interesting and maybe slightly problematic, I think, because it means I'm rushing off to this fire not with the primary objective of helping people, but with the secondary objective. Maybe there's nothing wrong with it, but it's a little removed, and it has more to do with being seen and my images.
I think that's true with any kind of missionary work. You know, are they helping the people with some other agenda because of their agenda?
They even mentioned that, in fact, about the helping agencies having to go out of their way and take time to allow them to do what they wanted to do. It took away from them.
Yeah.
But they're young.
But even in the opening scene, he's in a prison for kids.
Yeah, that was a good scene. I like that rap. He was a good
That
rapper.
gets to them.
Yeah.
That's a way to make it
Teach them
relevant.
phonically understood, all right?
Yeah.
Well, Tom, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for getting this discussion going. Thank you, all of you, for coming and participating. Very much appreciated.
Great film and great opportunity to have a community dialogue like this.
Absolutely, and you're welcome to stick around for a few more minutes, talk with each other and with Tom. It feels like the moment where maybe some people are ready to head out. So
Thanks for bringing it.
pleasure.
Thank you.